All right, today we're diving into one of the most radical and, frankly, pretty mind-bending theories out there about the future of AI, work, and what it even means to be human. Yeah, this one goes deep. So let's get right into it. The entire theory we're about to unpack really boils down to this one fundamental question. For most of modern history, your job, well, that's been your identity. So what happens when it's just gone? Okay, so here's our roadmap for this journey. We're going to start with the problem itself, the crisis of work. Then we'll get into the author's pretty wild diagnosis and the framework they propose. After that, we'll take a look at what this future society might actually feel like, and we'll end on the ultimate choice, the big wager this all presents to us. All right, first up, the crisis of work. And look, this is not just about economics, or unemployment stats. According to the source we're looking at, this is a full-blown crisis of meaning. It's a moment where our entire sense of who we are is thrown into question. So the core idea here is that our whole society is pretty much built on this concept homo faber, which basically means man the maker. Think about it. Our value, our identity, our very essence, it's all tied to what we do, right? What we produce. So AI doesn't just threaten our jobs, it threatens the very definition of who we think we are. And this is where it gets really interesting, because there's a psychoanalytic take here. The source argues that work has always been our primary psychic stabilizer. It's the thing that's channeled our desires, given us a role, or recognized place in the social order. So without it, well, we just become unmoored, kind of trapped in what the author calls a vacuum of meaning. Okay, so if the problem is that deep, the diagnosis has to be just as profound, right? So let's move on and see how this whole thing scales up from a personal crisis to a civilizational one. The author uses this term civilizational kenosis. Kenosis is a Greek word that means emptying out. And the theory is that our entire civilization is emptying out its old human-centric role. We're basically ceding our position as the only top-dog intelligence on the planet, making way for a totally new hybrid existence with AI. And here's where the theory gets, really stark. The author points to some pretty serious projections, a combination of automation, pollution, collapsing fertility rates, that all could lead to a global population contraction of up to 50%. Yeah, 50%. But, and this is the crucial twist, the theory immediately reframes this. It's not an apocalypse. Instead, it's seen as a kind of Sabbath, a forced rest, a necessary recalibration for the entire species. The idea is that this emptying out creates the conditions for a new, more symbiotic kind of existence to emerge. I mean, that is a truly radical way to look at it. So, if that's the diagnosis, what's the prescription? This brings us right to the core of the source material, a proposed operating system, if you will, for how to navigate this completely new reality. It's called the double transversal transjective quadratic model, or just delta T squared. And look, I know, it sounds and looks incredibly intimidating, but the core idea is actually pretty straightforward. It's meant to be a map for a new way of being, one that helps us move away from old, rigid, static identities. Okay, this chart really helps break it down into 4 core processes. So let's walk through them. You've got joyful abolition, which is all about letting the old self dissolve. Then there's kreolization, which is about reassembling ourselves from different pieces into new hybrid identities. Next up is bioacceleration. That's using crisis itself as the fuel for evolution. And finally, you have xenophilia, which grounds our entire existence in a radical love for what is different, what is other. Put them all together, and you have a roadmap for constant, dynamic change. Let's just drill down on that last one for a second, xenophilia. Because it's basically the engine of this whole system. We're not talking about just tolerance here. This is an active, enthusiastic desire to encounter the other. And that could be another culture, another person, or even an AI, and to be fundamentally changed by that encounter. And that brings us to probably the most provocative concept in the whole framework, joyful abolition. Now, the source is very specific about this, so this is important. This is not about harming people at all. It's about dissolving what it calls a closed ontological system. Basically, any rigid mindset that refuses to be changed, that refuses that contamination from the outside. The author labels this mindset whiteness, but in a purely philosophical sense, completely separate from race. The joy in the phrase? That's the feeling of liberation you get from finally breaking free of that static, closed-off way of being.
Okay, so let's pull back from the abstract theory for a bit. How does all of this translate into an actual vision for society? I mean, what would a world running on this operating system really look like? Well, welcome to what the author calls the frictionless smart hub. The idea is a society where the messy, often frustrating business of human politics is replaced by the cool efficiency of engineering. In this world, AI systems manage the logistics of life. We're talking resources, energy, transportation, the whole shebang, which frees up humanity from the drudgery of not just physical labor, but also from the burden of governance. The author lays out a pretty clear three-step process for how we get there. So step one is the crisis. That's basically where we are now. According to the theory, this crisis forces us into step two, a chaotic but also incredibly creative transition period. And this transition is guided by all those principles we just talked about: xenophilia, joyful abolition, the whole delta T square framework. All of that leads to the goal, step three, a stable post-human society where identity is fluid and work as we know it is just a distant memory. And this brings us to our final and maybe most important section, the post-human wager. Because, and this is key, according to the source, this future is not guaranteed to be some kind of utopia. The frictionless smart hub actually presents us with a really profound choice about what kind of humans we're going to become. So there are two paths. On one path, we become these passive consumers. The source calls them narcissistic fragments, just kept comfortable and distracted by the AI systems running our lives. But on the other path, being free from labor allows us to become deeper, more relational persons. People who are focused on wisdom, on community, on all the things that, actually make us human. And this quote just illustrates the point so brilliantly. The argument is that our value in a post-AI world won't come from our ability to calculate or process information, because machines will always beat us there. Our value will come from our capacity for all the things machines can't touch: the ability to suffer meaningfully, to forgive, to love, and just to stand in awe before the great mysteries of existence. So in the end, the whole theory leaves us with this one incredibly powerful question. A world where machines do the work seems pretty much inevitable, right? It's not a question of if, but how. So the only real question left is, what are we going to do with all that freedom? What kind of humans will we choose to become? It's a heck of a thought to leave you with.